Welcome, everybody, to the second in the series of connection stories on the Dying to Know podcast for the Hungarian Aquarian website. Today's guest is Terri, and Terri is going to talk about her brother who, after her brother's death, she was surprised to discover that communication with the dead was possible and that it happens more often than we had thought. Terri talked about her journey in a book called Never Parted, A Brother's Loving Teachings from the Afterlife. And in the book, she goes from grief to understanding, offering a universal message of comfort and hope. She shows us how thin the veil is that separates our daily lives from the deceased and lets us know that it's possible to reach across and learn the truth about death and life. And she does have a website that she can tell you about, or I'll have the information at the end of the podcast, where she has posted resources about life continuing after death. Welcome, Terri. Thank you for coming and telling us your story.
Thank you so much for having me today, Diane. I appreciate it.
I'm glad you could make the time. So why don't you give us some overview of what I don't know if you want to talk about your book or you want to just give us some stories that got you started on this whole journey, and we'll see how you have experienced this.
Okay, well, I'm a little spontaneous when I do these kinds of talks, and I trust that what shows up for me to focus on is hopefully what's going to give the audience really, the most inspiration and hope and helpfulness. And when we were talking earlier, what came to mind is I wrote a book about my experience, and I've had this experience, but in the last almost 7 years now, there's been layers to the story, and it's almost like it's story within story that I keep discovering. And so I think I might talk a little bit about that too, just my journey of like discovering there's always something kind of underneath going on, which is really interesting to me. Um,
That's fine.
so the first thing I want to say is this talk's dedicated to my brother Jeff, and he had a nickname that I gave him, which was Duffy. So I'll call him Duffy during this talk. And Duffy was a year and a half younger than me. And we have another younger brother, Chris. And so Duffy and I were close in age growing up, and he really was my best friend for the longest time. Um, because we were close in age, we played together a lot. But also, I think our personalities, even when we got older and we were adults, we just always really were in sync and got along really well. And we were always emotionally really in tune with each other. And I've come to believe that that's part of the reason, probably, that we're able to communicate with each other across, I'll say, across the veil. Um, I think that emotional resonance is really important for communication. So, my brother Duffy was 50 years old. He had just turned 50, and he was living down in San Diego. And he had had a long history of dealing with mental illness and addiction. And I think the addiction problem was much deeper than we knew. And at the end of his life, he was dealing with the after effects of a divorce. And so while he was a brilliant, kind, funny, caring man with a lot of talents, he was an athlete, he was a triathlete, he was a lawyer. Um, he also struggled, and he struggled, even from being a young child, he struggled with speech impediment and walking problems. But I always kind of had this feeling like every time I saw him, so when we were young, our parents divorced, and he ended up living with my dad, and my other brother and I went to live with my mom. And I always felt like Whenever I was with him, I just always felt like it was never enough time. I
Mm.
always had that sense when we left and said goodbye, like I just didn't get enough time with him. And in a way now, like that story underneath the story thing, I feel like the deeper part of me had already, like, the loss was already known. Um, and not even that it was coming, but it was already present because now I just am in this frame of mind that everything is happening in the now. And it's just our ability to turn into the different perspectives on it that make us think, like here on earth we have linear time, but I think that's sort of an illusion for us to live our life here.
Mm-hmm.
So, the last few months of his life, he really was struggling. I actually had gone down to San Diego to visit him, and I grappled with trying to convince myself to convince him to go into a detox facility. Um, we had a birthday party for him that was really lovely. Uh, just, I tried to be in the moment with him, but I also was scared in a way to push him towards treatment because I didn't think he would go. And so it was just a strange couple of weeks. But just clearly seeing he was in a lot of pain and not knowing exactly what to do. Um,
How long was that before he passed? That
it,
time that you were
it was a
visiting?
little over 2 weeks that I stayed down there, and I even went to his psychiatrist with him, and I was doing his dishes for him and his laundry. I mean, he really wasn't functioning well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I was almost going to make the decision to go down there to live with him for a while. That's how concerned I was.
Mm-hmm.
But he also was he was good at hiding things and he put on a good face. So some of those days he got up, he went to work, he looked great. And that part of me that wanted to believe it was going to be okay, got believed it. And so I ended up coming back home and deciding not to go down there. And I went back east for a vacation, but I kept calling him a lot and texting him, and he just wasn't returning my calls or texts. The night of July 24th, I'd gotten home from the trip and I'd gotten into bed. I was really tired, and it was after midnight. And right before I was going to fall asleep, it almost literally felt like somebody pushed my back and pushed me forward in the bed.
Mm.
And um, I didn't really think it was linked to him. I thought it was strange, but I was so tired, I just kind of fell asleep. And
Did
I
you
woke up.
not know he was what the situation was? Was he? You just assumed he was just not returning your calls.
Yeah, I mean, I was worried. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
was genuinely worried, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. No. And the next morning I woke up and I did this strange ritual thing kind of subconsciously. I put on all this jewelry that my grandmothers had given me that had passed. Um, and I went to work. And then I just started getting all of these texts from my other brother, Chris, saying that Duffy hadn't gone to work and his secretaries were worried. And one thing led to another. And finally, after like hours, my brother, they were all waiting outside of my brother's condo. And finally, the police came and, my little brother let me know that Duffy had taken his life.
Uh,
And I knew on some level. Um, but of course, then dealing with the reality of, you know, seeing that on the phone. Um, and so it just started a whole cascade of events and changes in the way that I looked at life that wasn't so different from how I looked at it before, but I think it just kind of created a new meaning for life for me. Uh, Immediately, I mean, I think that feeling that shove on my back was the first sign I got from him, literally, when he was passing, around the time he was passing.
Is that, did that correspond to the recorded time of death, or they didn't know?
They had to guess,
Mhm.
so they just guessed that it was sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. They weren't sure.
Mhm.
And so now I just fully believe that that absolutely was when he passed.
Mhm.
And I just started getting these really very specific synchronicities. And so I'm a very visual person. And one of the first synchronicities I got was the day after he passed, I was in the back of a car and I looked at this huge billboard, and I used to tease him a lot. So his nickname was Duffy, but I called him Fluff and Stuff and HR Puff and Stuff and,
Mhm.
sisterly kind
Little
of thing.
brother, little brother.
Yeah. And we drove by this billboard, this huge billboard, and it said something about Fluff and Stuff on it. And they just, I mean, literally, they just continued these synchronicities, license plates, and they just continued nonstop for a while. And I started journaling because I just felt like I wanted to capture everything that was happening.
Did you have a belief at that time in being able to connect with people who had passed? And did your brother ever talk about his beliefs?
It's interesting. I don't think either one of us ever thought much about it specifically. We were very open about, we always talked about the universe and science and physics and the mysteries of of life. We were always having those kind of talks.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, it's my younger brother who had had a lot of psychic experiences growing up that he didn't even really want to acknowledge. And I would say Duffy and I were open to it, but it's not necessarily something we focused on.
So what else came up when you saw the sign and you saw these little like synchronicities? Did it correspond to something in your head that made you think that, wait, maybe this is something he's trying to reach me?
Yeah, well, so I had the synchronicities visually, and then right off the bat I had what I call a dream visitation, which is really where I believe the spirit of the person is actually visiting you.
How did you know that that was a visitation? You want to share what it
You
was about?
know, it's interesting for people who believe they have them. I would say that the quality of the person, myself and the person in the dream, the quality of the interaction is so real and lifelike.
Mm-hmm.
It's different from a normal dream. And from what I've read so much now, and from what I've read from other people, there's always that feeling of they want to comfort you, they have a message for you potentially. And so I think it was within 3 days I had this dream visitation, and he was walking towards me, smiling, and he looked probably maybe in his 20s, healthy, and I couldn't see the lower half of him, which also sometimes is pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
But he was walking towards me smiling, and it made me really happy. But it was so fast when he started to disappear. I was like, no, wait, come back. And it just had a different quality to it. So I think I really feel it was a dream visitation.
He
Um,
didn't have a message. It was just a smile and a.
I think the message was the smile, and he looked healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the message because his health had been suffering before he took his life. And uh, unusual things. One night I was in bed, it was dark, and I felt like someone was pouncing on the bottom of the lower end of my bed, like jumping up and down, almost like a little kid. And I looked up, and in the corner of my room, I just saw all of these sparking, flickering colored lights for about 10 seconds, like a ball of light. And then it was gone. One of the that has stuck with me and keeps showing up to this day, that I feel like is a thread, maybe a thread telling me this is a window into a past life that you guys shared together. The synchronicity was when we went to clean out his condominium. Um, I found this wooden canoe he had. He had stashed it away in a drawer, and I had never seen it before. I didn't even know he had it, but it
It was
was
like a toy.
no, it was like a little 6-inch carved wooden canoe someone had carved. And it was literally identical to a 6-inch little wooden canoe I had found in Hawaii many years earlier that I had brought home.
Hmm.
And I still have them side by side in my bathroom. But the really remarkable thing, so I brought it home, and I'm a painter. I've been an artist for my whole life. And I had pulled out this painting before he passed, and I hadn't paid much attention to it. But when I got home, I kind of glanced at this painting, and I had painted this like 5 years before he had died, at least. And it was literally a painting of two canoes on a beach together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the same shape and everything. And so to me, that also, that was that thread of, wow, some part of me was connected in this way, and this synchronicity makes sense. And I painted this 5 years ago,
Yeah.
so some part of me knew that there was a timeless aspect to this. And for many times after he passed, when I was feeling down or thinking about him, like a car would drive by with two canoes on the top.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it still happens a lot. Or I'd see a picture, friends and relatives started sending me pictures, they started seeing two canoes, you
So
know.
that's kind of your sign from him is the
Yeah,
canoes. Mm.
that has been an enduring sign from him. Um, and, I'd like to think, okay, so we had a life together, maybe on a Polynesian island or something.
Any other experiences that you can share?
The thing also that's enduring, which is, I think, the hardest thing for people to understand, is this, unless you meditate. I think if you meditate, you can kind of understand it. But I spontaneously, a few months after he died, I put my hand out, my right hand out, palms facing the ceiling. And I just kind of spontaneously said, hey, Duff, if you want to visit, I'm open. And I just got this amazing, like, pressure, swirling energy on the palm of my hand. It literally moved my hand. It went up and down my arm. And that became also the thing where if I wanted to connect with him, I would just get in a meditative state, and I would put my hand out and I would wait for that to happen. And to this day, when I ask for him to visit and I do that, my hand will just, you can see it. So there's a lot of energy going on with that right hand in him.
And then does something happen afterward, or you just feel that he's there and that's what you wanted to know?
Feeling he's there, I'll just kind of talk about how things are going with me. I've gotten into this thing where a lot of mornings I would wake up and I would get an image of him in my head. Maybe he was doing something or wearing a certain outfit. And I came to believe that he was communicating with me about sort of his state of where he was at, in a way that I would understand it.
Did you ever
And
go to a medium?
yeah, so early on, I had met a medium at a conference, and he he was interested in the story, and he said to me, I will give you a free mediumship reading over the phone.
Hmm.
And he did that. He indeed did that. And this was early on. This was before I wrote the book. And he's since passed, but he was a really lovely gentleman. His name was Paul, and he it was interesting. I had never had a mediumship reading, and he did say some really specific things that just, like, nobody else could have known that. Like one thing, because he didn't really even know me at all. And one thing he had said that was very evidential to me was my brother and my uncle, who had passed a few months before Duffy did, they were joking around about me dressing up as a clown. And that indeed is something that I used to do. Yeah, I used to dress up as a clown for kids. You know, I'm a children's therapist. So um, there were things like that in the mediumship reading, like, oh, they see you dressed as the clown having fun, or you're worried about this one particular thing. So he was pretty good. He was pretty right on. I got the message from Duffy that yes, we had been together many, many, many lifetimes, and this lifetime was meant to be shorter. He was, he was sort of sorry for that pain that it caused me, but his message has always been it was his choice to take his life. The way I want to describe it and the way I've read about other people saying this is death is like you get up and you open the door and you walk through the door and you look down and you're still who you are. Circumstances are different. There's not a body, but your awareness of self is completely present. You still have to carry on your learning from wherever you were at. It's not like you magically become this amazing uh, individual or spirit that you were so much wiser than you were when you left. I don't think it works that way. I think we have to keep learning at the pace we've been learning at, even after we pass, has been his message.
So when and how did you come up with the decision to put things into a book and to create a website?
I had gone to a workshop, and so many things about that workshop made me really see that there's a lot of truth in what you focus on is what you get, I think. And that's almost like a creative force in the universe, because there were so many layers of things going on with that spirituality workshop. And I ran into people and witnessed people who I think, for the most part, were doing amazing work with others and had really delved into their own situation. But I ran into some people who I think were really not doing right by others. But I met a woman who ended up being a really skilled practitioner of EVP work, electronic voice phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I became friends, and getting to know her story and witnessing her work with EVP, and then we started doing EVP work together, uh, and I just felt like I was meant to meet her for even more validation of what was happening.
So
And
when
yeah,
you worked with her on EVPs, what did you?
so I have to say that the whole time that all of these incredible things are happening, I'm a therapist. And so part of me was always saying, really? Like doubting,
Yes.
like, really, Terry? I was trying to diagnose myself, like, maybe you're just having, grief psychosis or, but then the other part of me, and the only way I would say the other part of me is like my heart would say, nope, nope, nope. This is something altogether different. And by the way, you're able to go to work and do your work and carry on your life and no, you don't have psychosis. But there was always the doubter in me. And so I've always been looking for proof in a sense. And I'm the first person to keep asking again. And I'm really trying to work past that because I really think that doubt is gets in the way now. But it's a pretty intense seed, the seed of doubt that we all have.
Yeah.
I doubted myself. So I kept the journal because these crazy things were happening and I just wanted a record of it. But when I went to that conference, I met I met a number of mothers, and these mothers were from places like, a little town in Kansas. and they had lost their children. And a number of them were in the category of, hey, I know something unusual is going on and I believe it's my child, but I can't talk to anybody about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, other people were out there presenting and they had written their books about their experience and they were very confident, but there was a lot of people who weren't so confident. I think like my brother Duffy, I kind of fight for the underdog kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think in that at that conference I started getting the idea about writing the book as a way to just say, hey everybody, do not let anyone tell you you're crazy. Do not be afraid to speak about this. You know, keep exploring, keep asking questions.
So did the EVPs offer you some kind of evidence beyond the thought that maybe I'm just doing this in my head, or experiencing grief? Did the EVPs sessions?
Yeah. So the EVP has added a new layer of, well, if I'm being bamboozled, this is really amazing. Um, because this would be hard to pull off. So I'll give you an example. The very first EVP we did, we just had the laptop in a hotel room we were staying at, and it's very simple process. A recording program is on the computer. It's not hooked up to the internet. I think the name of the program is WavePad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's like a little like we used. I don't remember what we used in the room for like a little white noise. In the background, you can use like water running or a dryer.
Mm-hmm.
Some people use actual gibberish files. Um, and I was just a little nervous. And, you know, it was just part of me was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, you know, like, even though I'm really open. So we sat together and we started the recording. And I said something like, hey, Fluffy, I'm here. You know, hope you can come through. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And after you say something, you just kind of give a pause, like you stop saying something. So you give a pause and give room for spirit to come through. And so the EVP that my friend had captured, so when it's played back, there's a gentleman, and it's not my brother's voice, but there's a gentleman saying, thank you for calling Fluffy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I got one where it said, we love you, Terry.
Hmm.
Um, I got another one. It sounded like a group of people was, it was around my birthday, and it sounded like a group of people was singing, like encouraging him. So they were saying, well done, Jeff. His name is Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, well done, Jeff. And then I heard very actually distinctly his voice, happy birthday, Terry. So we've done a number. We haven't done them in a while, but it added a new layer of, wow, this is amazing. And how did I even, you know, how did I even meet this woman? Like the chances are one in a million.
Yeah.
And it's the craziest thing. How can anyone believe it? I don't even know if I believe it, but yet I do believe it. You know, so
But
it's
you're going in open, with an open mind.
yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like, you know, when I look around at the amazing things on this planet, you know, how astounding is the universe to think that we know it all, I think is just foolish.
So you said
So,
something about more layers. Has it also expanded beyond that? Um,
well, the more layers is that I think that conference really taught me that I saw a lot of people who believed in those folks who I felt were kind of not honest, but I saw people really believing in them.
mm,
And I knew what I was believing. And I just kind of saw playing out in front of me, wow, we all really do have this movie projector that we are running. and there always is a story beneath the story, and but the really important message with the synchronicities, I think what the synchronicities are trying to show me or us is we get to create our story. We get to believe what we want to believe, and it's absolutely truth.
It seems to me like sometimes people will say, when they've gone to a medium and the medium gives them like a little snippet of some trivial thing that, oh, that's not, that's no big message. But, it seems to me that, or if someone says like, I had a sign, or saw something really unusual that I never would have expected. It's got to be personal to you, and it's not something that's meant to go out to the world
Right.
to be proof to the world that yes, life goes on and they can connect with us or communicate with us. But if you get it and you know that that's something that's meaningful to you, then that's the sign, and that's the miracle, the confirmation of what you want
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah, I think the messages are sent in a way that completely speaks to us and we're going to get it. And that is because of the love between the two people. Um, and the another thing about the layers is now that it's been almost 7 years and I've been talking about this with people and my friends and relatives, I've started to have friends and relatives who have had people close to them die, and they've started to experience signs, but they are very clear in saying, I wouldn't even have thought this was a sign before I had talked to you. But now I kind of get it. And
Yeah.
it's providing them a lot of comfort.
I've had people ask me, they're like, well, I know I can tell you, but nobody else would believe me. And I'll say, what's a sign? Ask for a sign and tell them what would be meaningful to you, because that's how I started with my grandmother. I knew there's a song that she was her favorite song to play on the piano. And I've heard that in the most unusual places, in the most unusual ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I talk to her, sometimes I'll say, well, play the song for me so I know it was you that I was talking to, or you that did this. And that's how she knows to connect with me. Even on my answering machine, it would play. And it's a classical song. It's not like, Muzak. It's a classical music piece. So I know time has flown, and I just wanted to give people a little bit more from you and before we end. But you had said that you post resources on your website, and what kinds of resources have you found that you found helpful or that you wanted to share with other people?
Well, in the beginning, I was just reading voraciously, and I was going to workshops, and I was just checking out websites. I was just like inhaling information. And so on my website, I've got companies like the Forever Family Foundation, which specifically helps families or parents who've lost children, but they they also do some other outreach. Just different spirituality websites for EVP, for psychic interest, science, physics. So I've just got a number of different areas,
Mm-hmm.
and I've posted some blog writings myself and others have done, and I've posted some, I think the top 10 or 20 movies that have to do with the afterlife, things like that.
Sounds great. Like a nice hub of
Yeah.
research and information that people can connect with. Um, yeah, so I mean, you gave us some really good stories and some really good insight into your own experience, and I'm sure it's continuing. I'm going to let people know about the book. I'll put that on after the podcast, before the end of the podcast. It's called Never Parted, A Brother's Loving Teachings from the Afterlife. And I'm sure that there's a lot more stories people could get from reading that, right?
Oh, yes. I didn't even get into the gentleman. I ended up meeting a writer of his own book who read some of my writings through this other organization, and he was really very encouraged by the kinds of things I was writing about. And so he ended up doing an introduction for me, and he ended up at the end of the book just kind of corroborating some questions I had asked of my brother through automatic writing. So he ended up to be this amazing person to come and bless me out of nowhere. So there's a lot more in the book. It's not a really long book, but there's a lot in it.
So you just said automatic writing. So you did EVPs, you did automatic writing. Do you have resources for that and as well?
Yes, absolutely. The website's got all different resources. Automatic writing, different people have written about it. It's a technique that I actually used to do it as a therapist with clients,
Mm-hmm.
but I just applied it to trying to communicate with my brother. Um,
How did that work out?
it's interesting. I almost always find that I get something I totally don't expect to get when I ask a question, and when I read it, it just feels completely right on. But it's not something I ever could have wanted to wanted to get.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is sort of evidential.
So that in that way you can be kind of your own medium. You went to a medium, but through doing automatic writing, I know some mediums will say that's one way of making your own um, interaction with your loved.
Right. Right now, the way that I continue to communicate is through meditating and wanting to feel that energy on my hands, through the automatic writing, through this interesting process where I'll imagine a place we used to be, like the beach, and I'll ask him to show up, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll just wait for what comes to mind, and I'll literally have a conversation with him.
Have you had any more dreams?
He comes to my dreams a couple times. He came in a few weeks ago, and just being silly in a house somewhere, didn't recognize the house.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very present and looked really happy and looked great. And he shows up still, the fun synchronicities. He used to have a blue Porsche with like kind of a yellowish gold interior.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few months ago, I was out and about in town, and this blue Porsche drives by, and on the license plate it said DFF.
Oh my gosh.
And
Well, that's
so,
synchronicity.
right, and so I was like, "Oh, that was definitely him." And then I went to the coffee shop, and that guy pulls up in that car, and he got out. It was an older gentleman, and I told him the story of my brother, and I said, "So when I see your car, it's just amazing."
And did he seem receptive
Oh,
or?
yeah, he really thought it was great, and I'm like, "Yep, so, yeah, my brother is saying hello through your car."
See, sometimes you're a medium and you don't even realize.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been very interesting, and I really appreciate the stories you have told, and makes me want to read more about all your experiences and what's in your book. And I hope other people may have the interest as well. But you had a lot that you've been through, and the fact that you're a therapist, I think it gives it even more credibility, because you kind of looked at it from that standpoint, a more objective perspective to see, is this working, and what is happening here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I've analyzed it from that point of view, but I dropped that a while ago because I really do believe in what I've been experiencing now, and I've read enough and met enough people um, to think that it's very something very separate from the psychology world.
mm.
Yeah,
Well, even William James, the father of psychology, believed and tried to convince the science community to believe and to be open to these possibilities.
that's right. He did.
Well, I'm very happy to have had you as a guest, and you're always welcome to come back if you have more to share, and hopefully somebody will have heard the message that they need to hear from this, and I appreciate you being willing to share.
I really appreciate you having me, Diane, and giving me an opportunity to share. And I just want to say to folks that, if you do read the book, I hope you just take what speaks to you and leave the rest,
Mm-hmm.
and that something does speak to folks and gives them some hope and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you again.
Thank you, Diane.